It's a question every digital artist asks themselves. Should I make physical work? Today, we're going to go in depth on this question to see if we can bring some light to the matter. Artist Journal, March 29th, 2023, broadcasting live from Berlin and New York City on Rug Radio via Twitter Spaces. My name is Adrian Pocabelli, and we welcome back co-host, artist, and conversationalist to the show, Rune Tune. Rune, how is your week going?
It's going great. I'm kind of back into the swing of things. I feel like I had a couple crazy weeks, and now we're back into the routine. How is your week going, Pocabelli?
I have to say, it's been quite amazing. This Chat GPT 4, like I listened to one too many interviews about this whole Chat GPT thing. And then, so of course, there's Chat GPT Plus, okay? And then you can spend $20, and I subscribe today. I mean, I'm going, as you know, to Italy. As I think you know, I'm going to Italy next week. So I was just putting into the thing, you know, the one that's available that everybody has used is ChatGPT, I think 3.5. And so I was like, create an agenda for, a week in Tuscany, and it provides you a very nice thing. And then the new version, which you have to pay for, it's in the ChatGPT Plus. It's even more. It's like bullet points. It's all like, I mean, it's like an incredible personal assistant among many other things. So I've been kind of wrapped up in that, and also I've been uploading. As you know, I was just messaging you on this. I've just uploaded all the Twitter Spaces that we've done here on Spotify. They're not beautifully edited, but they are done well enough, and they're there. And now the new ones, as they come in, I have learned to edit them. So that's what I'm up to over here.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm really excited to peruse these, especially the ones that came before our regular Twitter Spaces. There's quite a few up.
Well, yeah. So it's kind of funny. When I first started the show, like the regular Twitter Spaces, I started, say, in mid-December, I think, or late December. And then I think you were on within like 2 episodes. It was just natural chemistry there, Rune Tune. And what I was doing before was, when I had started actually the YouTube show, you can actually upload video to Spotify, but it just didn't seem worth it, and it was taking a lot of time, and there's hardly any viewers on Spotify. So I thought, meh, I'll leave the Spotify. So that's what you might see there. And then we imported it, and so you can't even see the video there anymore. So I probably need to clean up, actually. There are some ancient shows on there. But anyways, yeah, I'm excited for the Spotify.
Me as well. So for this Chat GPT, the Plus version, is it a one-time payment, or is it a subscription?
It's a subscription, so it's not nothing, at $20 a month, right? I mean, that's a pretty dedicated subscription. So I'm going to do it for a month. It works faster. Like right now, I was trying to get stuff this morning, as I'm using it more and more, as I think everybody else is starting to use it more and more. And it was getting busy. And part of the deal with ChatGPT Plus is you get a much faster speed with this. So it's pretty cool. It seems, when you consider, like, we can take transcripts from this show, and we can take, if we're talking about, I don't know, screen printing and pixel art, for example, we can take those paragraphs and we can feed them into ChatGPT, these very rough paragraphs, and say, make an article out of this, and it'll give us a beautiful rough draft for the most part. And then, as long as you don't get lazy and you edit it from there and then add a bit of your own personality into it, you have an article. And I mean, that would have taken you 6 hours. Maybe you'd go back the next day and you're doing it in like half an hour. It's crazy. So, yeah. So
that is wild. So you said you used it for your trip. What was it that you asked it to do? That it gave you like bullet point
Yeah,
ideas?
right. So ChatGPT 4 gave me bullet points. So here's just kind of an interesting development, and then we'll get to our topic. I see the room is filling up here with some wonderful, familiar PFPs here. But basically, almost the exact query is create an agenda for going to Tuscany for 7 days, staying in an Airbnb in Livorno. And then it's like, okay, day one, hang out in Livorno. Day two, go to Florence. Day three, go to Pisa and see XYZ. See this monument, this monument. Then you should go for lunch at this place. So it's like better than a personal assistant.
I've never thought about doing that. I'm probably going to play around with that. As someone who likes to travel, I mean, I came to New York for a reason. It's kind of like the entry into the rest of the world. My favorite thing to do is use Google Maps. I don't even know what I used to do before Google Maps, but to like prior to going anywhere, kind of suss everything out, save all the locations in a list and as, kind of bookmarked on the Google Maps. Imagine if ChatGPT had access to an app like Google Maps and you could be like, mark all the places you think it would be worthwhile going to. And then in seconds, it just does all the legwork for you. That'd be amazing.
I think that's what it might do. Like my sense, and you're already hearing like newspapers are wanting to sue ChatGPT because uh, there is there's a sense that they did a massive scraping of the internet. So I'm assuming that's probably anything that was available, including every single review that was on Google. And yeah, like you say, it's probably just a matter of time before you can plug in Google Maps into this AI. So yeah, it's pretty unbelievable for traveling. And I didn't come up with that idea myself. I was listening to an interview and I was like, oh, so it's well worthwhile. I'll just say before we get into our topic here, it is really worthwhile to keep tabs on this. It's wild. And you think, okay, $20 a month is a lot of money actually for a subscription of some digital product. But when you consider like what would a personal assistant cost you? And is it able where I can start pumping out 5 articles a day? Is that worth $20 a month? I think so, right? So the plot thickens over here. I see Mikey de la Creme. I see Blue Retina. I see Mikkel, Nicola. I see Joe. Dr. Version is back on stage. So request to join the conversation, anybody. I see Mental 420. I see Ollie Izakowski, Retro Manny, Blue 7, Sid. Welcome everyone to the show, and it's so good to see Michael here, Michael, who was one of the first two people to ever encourage, speaking of Spotify, this entire project when it was a fledgling idea that was just out there in the ether and sent out a tweet saying, this is awesome. So that was great. So anyways, Runtune, maybe we can get the conversation started. And again, anybody, if you want to request to speak, we will bring you on stage. I might send out some invites for you to join us on stage, as a little prank here from my apartment in Berlin here. But Runtune, tell me your story. I mean, as far as I understand, you started in physical art, and of course, you've done digital art. Tell me, how has that, progressed for you in your history?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in the 80s, so I was definitely working with physical mediums. I mean, when Microsoft Paint came out, I was, you know, a curious kid, definitely played around with that, but I never took those digital tools very seriously. I guess it's just something you kind of are programmed to think going to school and learning art history, everything's these physical mediums. So yeah, I've been a physical artist for a lot longer than I have been a digital artist. And my transition into the digital arts was, well, basically taking photographs of physical work and minting them and running into just different personalities on Twitter and learning more about this, NFT community. It became clear that, like, for a lot of people, it's important. Actually, I think it was your show that kind of like sold me finally on this idea that if I'm going to continue, minting, I got to make an effort to have some sort of quality about the work that is like digitally native in some way or other. So a lot of what I've done up until this last year has just been taking these physical works, taking a photograph of them, and manipulating the photo to make it digital, either by like animating it, turning it into a GIF, or, something else. And I am at a point now where I've done enough GIFs and animations that I would love to see them hanging on a wall. And so that's kind of my, you know, outlook in terms of taking the work I've done that's digital and making it physical. I think it was in your show you had Neurocolor had created, what is it called? Impossible Objects. Is that right?
It's possible. It's possible.
Im- let me look this up.
Sure.
Impossible Objects. Anyways, they do these. Yeah, it is. It's Impossible Objects.
I'll look this up
Uh,
too.
they do these little screens that are, they're made for housing digital art. They do these little screens that are like, it's a fixed screen and they give you all the information that you might need for, the type of resolution that you should be looking at. But when Neurocolor posted a video of one that he made, it just looked fantastic. I mean, it was perfect. They have options for like different colored frames, but the clear one is pretty fantastic. And they're not meant to be like those skylights where you can like import different photos or different artworks and have it kind of on loop. There are those things, but these are just meant to house the singular piece of artwork that you load to it. What's funny is I've started working with like a pixel dimension for my works that will work with these. Oh, it's infinite objects. Sorry, not impossible objects. Infinite objects.
Okay. Yeah,
That's what it is.
I have his work in front of me. They live up to their name, and with these colors. So I was kind of confused by what you were saying, though. So
Oh no, I was just saying Neurocolor is a good example of someone who does these digital works that couldn't be. I mean, you could print a still from the work, but it's animated and it's
right.
very colorful. And there's no way to bring a GIF to a physical medium unless that physical medium is a digital screen. And I guess what excited me about it was that it was nice and small. Anyone could fit it in their home anywhere, and it's not so much about this process of like taking digital and bringing it to a physical world, but more so taking these things and seeing them not on a computer screen. I think that's kind of like, for me, a criteria by which I want to like view some of this artwork that I enjoy daily. I don't want it to be stuck on my phone or stuck on a computer. I want to see it like on a wall somewhere. And I want to see it treated the way we treat paintings and drawings and prints. But to see like an animation moving would be like really exciting for me. I think it'd be like a new way of viewing art, because it's one thing to just take like a still from maybe a GIF or take an actual, digital artwork that you did on, say, Procreate or Ace Brite or something and do a screen print. I mean, I think that'd be amazing. But to see animations hung up on the wall as if they were paintings, I think that would be a new way to view art within a space. I think it'd be really cool.
And help me out. So did he achieve that, or did they?
Oh, yeah, they here, let me see if I can find Neurocolors. It's probably an old post, but Infinite Objects is essentially this company that allows you to take, they were made for the NFT community essentially. And
Oh, it's like a frame. It's a digital frame.
it's a digital frame,
Okay,
exactly.
gotcha. So you can show
Um,
a GIF, for example.
yeah, and I'm
Got
sure
it.
that they have like a Twitter and all of that. Actually, I'll
So it's an interesting, yeah. Like I mean, I've thought about the GIF. So in a sense, basically, I mean, the digital frame, though, and I remember what you're talking about. It is a screen, though, in all when it's all said and done. From my impression, my solution for GIFs, I kind of had a weird one because I've done a few GIFs, and I thought, how would I make this physical? And it's actually quite fun, and it's that transition from digital to physical where all sorts of magic can happen. So, for example, I was thinking of this Lego work that I had done that was animated, and it was made of about 25 frames. And I thought, oh, I could theoretically screen print each one of those frames, across horizontally across the walls of the gallery, let's say on different little works on paper, and then maybe in the middle you have a screen with the actual GIF, and then you'd sell each of those 25 as kind of each unique works, kind of like an edition, but each is different. So yeah, in that transition from digital to physical, I mean, it's it gives you different sets of problems to solve, and in that it brings out kind of a different manifestation of the work, which is kind of
Yeah,
exciting.
I like the way that you put that. It gives you different problems to solve. That's very true.
And yeah, and so different opportunities and everything. I mean, another thing, the screen memories series that I do, where I'll put like these colors, really kind of hard edged colors on top of Renaissance paintings, let's say, that are kind of a lot of browns and everything. And welcome Dr. Version to the stage. That was also another, like, because before blockchain, and to your earlier point about physical and digital, like it was kind of digital was taken seriously, but I wouldn't say it was taken as seriously as it is today. Like now millions of dollars have been spent on digital artwork. It kind of was before, but you still had this problem. Like I remember going to a artist talk in Berlin in maybe 2018 or 2017, and they were talking about how, we're going to put the video on the USB and then we're going to sell the USB, and how that was actually how it's kind of how it's done, I think, still in some respects, because you can't put like a 4 gigabyte file, as far as I understand, on the blockchain. So they still actually kind of do this. So anyway, Dr. Version, welcome to the stage, and I'm going to send out some invites to everybody too. But anybody request to speak, Dr. Version, how have you navigated going from digital to physical? Like, do you share this sense that I had, that in a sense it wasn't really taken too seriously, really, up until recently? I mean, I remember having a phone, and I was making a lot of work on a phone, and I remember showing it to this contemporary art, older sort of contemporary art person, and she basically was like, it was right out of a movie. That's a toy, is what she said. And I thought, wow, it's almost ominous in a good way. Anyway, what do you have to say, Mr. Virgin, Dr. Virgin?
Yeah, I was thinking when you're talking about printing up each frame of a GIF, I've thought about that with my stuff. But I knew video art existed. I knew all this stuff was around. I mean, I was born in the 70s. I definitely, even as a kid, had a camcorder and messed around and made skate videos with my friends, and messed around with the filter. So I was always into that. But then I went to school and was going to be an architect, but that soon transitioned, thank God, into doing fine art and painting, even though I have strong opinions on art school and what they teach. But, I made a lot of work. And so I've made paintings, silk screening, I've done t-shirts, I've done tons of stuff. And I have a collection of this. And I know, Adrian, I've told you before, I recently moved, and having, let's say, 40 to 50 canvases, boxes of silk screens, t-shirts, drawings, posters, like all this stuff. It's like I'm looking at that while I'm packing up in New York City, trying to figure out what I should keep, and I did destroy a bunch of paintings because I was like, I can't take all of this. It's not going to fit in the the biggest box truck we got. And it's expensive. So then I look at my collection on Object. I'm like, well, I wish everything was here. Like, just out of practical matter, as much as I love physical, paintings and the craft and, you know, the size and the scale and everything, it's just an easier path, and you can get your ideas out there, and you can keep the momentum going. I think it's really like sluggish now, and living in New York, trying to find a studio space, I always, in every apartment I had a corner of the room that got a little messy, that I did paintings over
Man, I
20
hear
some years
this.
living in New York. And what I did, I probably made, a couple paintings a year. I've done more work in the last year and a half and exposed it to an audience, and people have collected it. And I think, that's key to me. Like, it's just, the other way now, I would be like, I don't even know how I would go about it.
Well, to your
Um,
point, I mean, I think you've highlighted so many of the issues that come with physical art, and I mean, it gets harder and harder to justify. I mean, it really feels like it's a luxury. It's a matter of, well, do you have the money? Do you have the space? Because it's all going to cost you money. And it's like, where are you going to do it? Where are you going to store it? I had the exact same problem when I moved from Toronto to Berlin. Paintings that I literally worked like, I was doing a painting a year. I think they're at my friend's place, like I don't know where my Techniques turntables are. Like physical, it's a real luxury and it's harder and harder to justify. And I can go, okay, this afternoon, let's say I have a couple of hours to spend on art. Okay, let's say am I going to do physical and then kind of, spend my afternoon with that? Or am I going to go digital and maybe sell something tomorrow and then maybe bring in $50 or whatever the case may be? You know what I mean? So it really is. I mean, luxury is the word that's sort of on my mind when I hear that.
I've used this sort of argument, the whole like, oh, the physical process takes up a lot of space, to kind of sell people, the skeptics that I know who they're skeptical of NFTs and digital art. It's a good point to bring up. Dr. Version, speaking of these infinite object screens, your work would look fantastic on these. I don't know if you can see that. I posted it to our spaces, but this Neurocolor infinite objects digital screen is it's like made for your type of work.
Thanks so much. I have seen those infinite object screens and they are pretty great. And that is like, how do you display this stuff? Because I think last week I was talking about how it's, I look at these as moving paintings, at least my work, and a lot of stuff I see. And then it comes into the scale, like how does it look on a screen? But yeah, I'd love to have one of those. And I still haven't figured out a way to display my object or my Tezos collection at home. I have a space above in the stereo, like above the stereo, above the turntable, and I just want a screen. So if anyone has any thoughts on how to cycle through GIFs, like, hey, a GIF is up for 10 minutes and then it goes to the next one, and I can look at my whole collection. Mainly I collect motion, even though, I like it all. But I think an advantage of video too is that or digital art, it can be motion, especially with GIFs. It's
Are all
just
of your works, your digital works, are they all the same dimensions?
no, they're all over the place. That's another thing that, how do you do this? Unless you project them maybe, but yeah, they're
Yeah.
not. And it's something to keep in consideration, because it's kind of weird when you see something that doesn't fit the frame, and we're just so used to it. And I don't know how that's ever going to be
Well,
addressed.
maybe in the future there will be some manufacturing miracle that happens that allows people to choose the exact screen size down to the pixel before they, you
Yeah.
know, have one of these things manufactured.
Yeah, just one other thing about, like, digital and scale. And I don't know if anyone went to the refraction show last year at NFT NYC. It was in Gowanus, and great. They've done such a good job at like presentation. But you walk in, and in the back, there's a giant Nicholas Sasson, like 60 feet projection. And imagine trying to put something like that's physical. Like it was done so well, where, and then that's how do you put that on a thumb drive, Brain 2, or if it's on the blockchain, it doesn't. So yeah, these are all things I'm thinking about with all my collection and everything. How do you display them? Do you get a projector? Because yeah, I just don't want to look at it on my phone or laptop or computer.
It's way too practical, this digital thing, isn't it? And like moving and everything, like, and even working within, you can have undo, you can have layers that you can turn on and off, you can do variations, you can kind of reuse stuff. Again, it's just so hard to justify on a practical level. Now, on an artistic level, like on a conceptual level, it does feel like it's still important, and it's actually kind of feels like a very rich area to explore. Like Runtun was saying, how he uses his physical work, if I understood correctly, as sources for his digital, right? And I think that's, a very rich area. And it's kind of funny, like where I've gotten to with the physical is I would take my palette. I mean, these were the last things I was doing physically, say like 6 months ago, is I'd take my, these paper palettes and I'd put a bunch of paint on them and, brush them around and then take a picture of that so that I could put it into my digital work, these kind of splashy paint marks. But I mean, that's how far it's gone for me, where it's sort of like I have canvases that have been sitting next to my wall for months, but so that is the extent of what I'm actually using and being able to justify because I can, it takes me 5-10 minutes and I walk out with 20 pictures of paint that's sort of smushed around that I can import. So it's an interesting area conceptually, I think, because in a sense, these are siloed universes, I would argue. When we work digitally, we tend to mostly stay in a digital universe. And when we work physically, we tend to mostly work in a physical domain. Like we're not necessarily printing things off in Photoshop and stenciling them and then bringing them into our painting. But it seems that, like, if you asked me what was like the last big conversation in my world, from my opinion, of in contemporary art, it is this combining mediums. In the late Warhol, where he'd sort of, take a graphite pencil, take a picture, do an outline of Goethe or whatever, take a picture of that, blow it up, and then screen print that, with paint, with acrylic paint. I mean, and so he's, playing with scale and, as I always say, traveling through the mediums. And so conceptually, I feel like it's still a very rich area and will provide, opportunities and just, things that'll never happen if you just work exclusively digitally or physically. Dr. Version, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that just reminded me. I went to Art Basel this year, first time, which was a lot of fun. I didn't, went to the main event, which was whatever. I've been to a bunch of art fairs, but there was a piece I saw, which it was in a dark room in this warehouse district way out in Miami somewhere. And it was a painting that moved. Like you look at it, you're like, that's a physical work. And at first, what is going on? Is this some new infinite object screen? Is this like a lighted canvas or this? It was pretty magical. But then I realized there was a projector projected onto the painting. So it's a painting that was lit by the same image that moved. It was pretty incredible. I don't know if anyone's ever seen anything like that. I've heard of things like this before, but this was pretty well executed. If I have a video of it, I think I'll post it if anyone's interested. I didn't particularly like the art, but the technique was, yeah, it was like, this is somewhere that needs to be explored more or something.
I would
Yeah.
love to see a video of that. You definitely have to tweet that if you can.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
Okay, awesome. And I'm finally seeing
All
these
right.
infinite objects in Runetoon's link here. I recommend everybody check out. I mean, it's quite stunning. I don't know if I've ever seen that. Maybe Beeple's work way back when. It's like almost in this hyper protective, what looks like mylar or glass or clear plastic, and with what looks like a tablet inside. We're still stuck with that ratio problem. But yeah, as you guys were mentioning earlier. Runtoon, do you have any thoughts on like you work with physical and bring it into digital? Do you have any just thoughts, and are you still doing that? And it seems like it the last few works I've seen from you, but any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, I've been working a lot more digitally and like just starting something in Procreate or Photoshop and using those tools. The last thing that open edition I minted, the reference was from a painting, but I mean, it's like one frame out of 60 is a reference to this physical work, and then the rest was completely digitally done. Something I was thinking about, it's very true what you say when if you work exclusively digital, or if you not even exclusively, if you work physically, you tend to be kind of sucked into working only physically, or if you work digitally, it is kind of hard to have that sort of be almost like bilingual in a way with your digital or physical process. I know that over the years, like just being trying to grow myself in this digital community, I have been working almost exclusively digitally. Actually, a couple weeks ago when my friend was here, that was the first time in probably a year that I've done any physical work outside of just some simple sketches.
How did it feel?
Oh, honestly, it felt great. Like if I had more time in my life, I'd love to be able to, be as equally prolific in both digital and physical work. But something that's been on my mind is like, prior to NFTs, I actually, I mean, I was making quite a few sales, for just being unknown artist, I would make, 10 plus sales a year. And a lot of those same people that I sold to over the last couple of years, some of them they've hit me up. They're like, "Oh yeah, I have a new space. I'd love to commission you for something." And it's just like this conversation is kind of it's a good one to keep me thinking about that, because it would be nice to take digital work and make it physical in a way that made sense for people who maybe don't have any interest in digital work whatsoever.
Well, I think it's like, and I've mentioned this before, but I think it's worth re-mentioning. It really does, I think, just from a purely, PR point of view, if I see an artist that is doing digital and physical, I kind of just from a very basic level, maybe take them a little bit more seriously. And maybe that's totally an unfair bias. And I just call it a bias, but I think a lot of people might have that bias. Like it kind of shows range, right? It shows like, oh, because there is a sense, and fair or not, that maybe a lot of people just started doing digital, and that maybe they're newcomers, maybe they saw a way to make some money, and I think that's actually an unfair and assumption, but I think it's worth recognizing that that kind of way of thinking about this exists, right? And I'm not saying we should all just do, hey, let's, be the best PR, find the best PR we possibly can and pursue that. But I think it's sort of as we're trying to make our way, trying to live from our art and already working, let's say, or not in some cases in physically, I think it's worth it. I think it like I just kind of, and fairly or unfairly, I tend to take that a little bit more seriously on just a basic level.
It's funny you say that, because I feel like my bias works in the opposite direction. When I find out someone doesn't do any physical work and that they've only ever worked with digital tools, it makes me feel like a dinosaur, because I'm so attached to the physical mediums that I grew up with.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so there you go. So, Retro Manny, I'm so glad that you've joined us on stage. Welcome to the show. Where are you calling from?
Hi, Adrian. Thanks for inviting me up. I'm calling from the UK, England. So yeah, it's around about 3 o'clock here.
Awesome. Yeah, it's 4 o'clock here, so we're about an hour off here in Berlin. It's great to see you. So, tell us about your work a little bit. Did you start physically and then move digitally? What's your story?
I think, I guess I'm a digital native to some degree. Back in the early 2000s, I was studying film. And really, when we were making films at university, it was all about creating them for the screen, for projection, or to be seen at least with a physical audience, like with, next to different people in a particular room. And what I really find interesting about this whole conversation is it really reminds me of where we are now, like you watch films on your phone nowadays or various different devices just in your own space. And I just finished directing a project which was, it was a big project, a huge amount of funding, and we were just finishing up on the color grade, and we have to do a color grade for a cinema experience. So I won't bore you with the kind of technicals, but there's particular color spaces that you've got to use that make sure that it's seen correctly in a dark room, basically for the cinema. But the moment you send that to people for checking, and if they haven't got the right calibration of screen, or they're just looking at it on their phone, it looks horrendous. It doesn't look right, because it's a different way of experiencing the film. So it needs, different lighting and all this kind of stuff. So for me, that's kind of the same in terms of it being physical, as in being seen in a particular place with people next to you and everyone having to have that same experience, or it being digital where everybody can experience it in their own sort of space. So you've got to do different versions when you make a film. You've got to do basically a version for the phone. You've got to do a version for TV screens, and then you've got to do a version for the cinema. So yeah, that's kind of the history of what I do. It's a little bit different with my NFTs, but that's that's a bit of history on
It's
it.
a very subtle point you bring up because I assume you're working digitally, right? But it's almost like you're having to create these outcomes for different hardware that is going to show your digital, right? Like, because the iPhone is going to render your, color grade, I think you called it, in a certain way. And then, a cinema is going to have its own thing. Like, it's kind of like you're right in between there because you're kind of dealing with the physicality of these screens and how they render, and all that sRGB and all that sort of thing, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think I mean, the whole point of it, why I bring it up is because even though it's still digital, like what I create is digital, digital cameras and everything, it's got to be, and it's projection on screen, it's got to be a different experience because for some, it's experienced together with a bunch of other people in a space that they're all seeing at the same time. And so it's in a dark room. So it's like, how you have an art gallery, it's in a, the white cube, whatever you want to call it, it's got to be experienced in that way. And so it's got to be lit correctly, or it's got to be painted so that it looks a particular sort of way. And it's the same with cinema. Now, with my paintings, I've also recently had those exhibited at an art gallery, a big event where I live in England, and that was another hugely different experience, was trying to get the digital paintings that I've created on my screens to print out looking how I wanted them, and it's not a simple process
Not
either.
at all. Sorry, continue. Yeah,
Yeah,
like this is
yeah. So it's a massive challenge because it wasn't created for that purpose, but you've got to try and enable it so that people can experience in that same way. And the funny thing is, we had a metaverse event like about 2 weeks ago where one of my pieces was exhibited there, and that tries to give a gallery experience, right? So you walk up to the piece and you can see it on the wall. And what I found weird about that was when you watch it in the like you see it from the wall, from your view as a character in the metaverse, it gives a completely different experience to when you click on it and just see it large on screen, like it's just, you're just clicking on it on YouTube or something. So there's all these different things you've got to consider when you're creating work, and it's all about that end. Like, how do you want people to receive it? How do you want people to experience it? Arguably, in physical, where you can control the space, is the best, and where people are interacting with each other while experiencing that piece. This is why I think having physicals is so good. Digital, you can't control how they experience it. You can't really have a say. It's kind of, you let it over to the internet or whatever and just say, well, however they see it, whatever their screen settings are, whatever device they're using, that's the way they're going to see it, and that's that. So, yep. Either way, I think it's a really interesting conversation. So thanks for letting me
well,
up.
my pleasure. And I just want to echo, I just think you just hit the ball out of the park with this whole idea of how do you take a digital image that you've made that kind of works on a digital level, and how do you make it work physically? And I have gone through this struggle, and it's almost like the work itself will give you its own solutions, that are possible, or you're going to have to come up with your own solutions. We were talking about GIFs earlier. Maybe one thing you can do is you create 25, if you have 25 frames in the GIF, you create 25 different images, and then you also show the GIF on a screen in a gallery. You put the 25 different things on paper, and there's your kind of solution. I really struggled with this. Like, I made an entire show of this screen memory series I do with very kind of sharp edges and kind of pencil tools. So these perfect circles, and then the fill tool. And I was trying to emulate these things. So, and I'd put those over top of Renaissance painting. So I was like, okay, I'll print out the Renaissance painting onto canvas, and then I'll paint over top this, mask that I do. And what I was doing was, first I did it manually. And so I had my little brush, and I would take like a week to try and re-emulate this mask. And it didn't really look convincing. And it took me a whole other year to realize, oh, I should be screen printing this, and then I was like, oh, okay, I screen print. And then it creates what's really interesting about that whole journey for me, though, is you have a work at the end of the day when it's physical that wouldn't have been possible without digital interference, or, a digital step, shall we say. So it kind of actually, in a weird way, it's kind of this hybrid, even though it's all physical solutions. But it's a very fun thing to do. It's a very challenging thing to do, though, because, if it's a moving work, it's very challenging. Again, maybe you break it up into frames. If it's a still work, see, like, every genre or type of work will present its own solutions. So, for example, pixel art, it really lends itself well to screen printing. It's back to this. If you want those hard, crisp digital edges, then screen printing, for example. Reso printing, meh, okay, maybe. So it's just a fascinating. What I love about it, it's extremely challenging. But if you start to solve these things, I mean, pixel art that doesn't move, let's say, and then you emulate it with screen printing. I mean, it's there's an alchemy there in that transformation when just like Warhol putting that graphite pencil and blowing it up, it's exactly the same and screen printing the graphite, it has that exact same kind of transformative quality, and it kind of becomes instant poetry. Like if you see pixel art that is screen printed, it's incredibly seductive, but it's a different experience, completely different. So anyway, do you have any final thoughts on that, Retro Manny?
Well, I think most people know I'm a huge fan of pixel art. I don't do it myself, but I've never experienced it in physical, so it's really had me in awe to know what that would look, or to love to be able to see what that would look like. Actually,
Yeah, there's a
yeah.
great artist. I can't remember his name. I'll see if I can dig it up at some point. And that's actually where I figured out the solution because he was screen printing like this pix. Well, he was screen printing pixels, not so much what we might consider pixel art, but pixels and in black and white. And I was like, oh, of course, screen printing. Nicola, thank you for joining us on stage, Manny, and stay on stage if you want to add comments as well.
Th-
Nicola,
thank you, Pocomari, for having me. It's a pleasure. And you give me a great assist because one of the project from digital to physical that I made recently is exactly on this point on bitmap and pixel, but not with screen printing, but with etching. So in my last project, I did this thing to print with the etching technique, something that is digitally native. So because etching and intaglio techniques are something that I used to practice since 20 years because I came from I'm an architect too, so I found a lot of similarities with all the people on stage, and I work in the field of the visual art since the beginning of 2000, with especially with painting and printmaking. Then I came to the NFT world in November 1921, and I started with my digitized work, my physical work that were transferred in digital with some scanned, basically scanned, and then post-processed with Photoshop or other software. And then with the time, I try to switch my practice toward to make something really digitally native and to be used on a digital media, not on a physical media. But then recently, I try to do these things. I don't know if I can pin
yeah,
the
yeah, feel
uh,
free to pin up whatever you like. That goes for anybody that actually comes up. That is the bonus. Is feel free to pin up your latest work or any work that you feel.
and
Uh,
here, basically, you can find the idea behind the project that is exactly what you were speaking before. So pixel, but etched on metal and then printed on paper with the intaglio technique.
I am looking. Let me see. I'm dying to see that. So yes, post it up when it. Yeah, as soon as you can. Here, let me see if I. Oh, here it is. Nicola Villa. Where are you calling from, Nicola?
From Genoa, from in Italy.
Oh, cool. I'm
Yeah.
actually going to Pisa
If
actually
you
on
if you are
Saturday.
in Livorno, you are really near to my.
Exactly.
You
Well, maybe
definitely need to take a stop in Genoa.
I was going to say we can have a
It's a
cafe.
beautiful city. It's a beautiful city, really.
Well, that's very good to know. Now, tell me, maybe I'll be able to figure it out from your link here. But as far as etching, I mean, my understanding of etching is like help us out here because maybe not everybody's familiar, but where you're actually like you're carving. What are you carving into?
Yes,
Like it's
yes.
metal, isn't it?
In is metal and is carved by hands but basically by acid. So you put
Right.
a plate of metal that you can varnish in the parts that you don't need to etch, so that you want to take white basically, and the other part, the part that is not protected by that varnish, will be practically eaten by acid. So then, when you put we ink on it to print, the ink will stay just in the carving and not in the other part of the plate.
Right. You carve out the inverse, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You work with the negative basically.
Exactly.
Mm.
So what we're looking at here, and I encourage everybody to look at Nicola's link. Did you manually,
No,
carve out basically every pixel, and then
basically, I used to do like this, or maybe painting with varnish with my historically works. But with this project, since I need to have the exact shape of the pixel on the plate, I used a photographic
like
transfer, like the one
ah
that you can do with the screen, the screen for the screen print, you know.
right. So you can do transfer on etching.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Also from screen
Interesting.
printing, you can transfer, but there is a lot of technique around this. But it's, as you can where we're speaking before, is a big luxury to make intaglio prints right now.
Well, absolutely. And yeah, like I've done lithography. I assume you've usually
Mm.
people who've done etching have done lithography. They're usually kind of in the same studio, aren't they? And yeah, lithography, I still haven't wrapped my head around if you can do photo transfer. I was sort of told, yeah, but not really, and this sort of thing. So that is super interesting. And in that process, because it's not going to come out perfect, right?
Uh,
So it's because not every pixel I saw there was square.
Yeah, yeah. The no in the other, because the first image are practically square, but you have
Right.
to make one process, because if you engrave just a line and you put in the acid, the line comes up really clear, etc. But yeah, if you have a surface to engrave, you have to put some texture inside the surface to make the ink stay and print out. If you look at the little square, they have a kind of texture of white and black, that is the texture that
Yep.
detain the ink to print.
Exactly. Like it's not perfect, and maybe that's what gives it charm. Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
if it was
absolutely.
perfect,
And also, when you print the etching, you have to print one by one,
uh,
by inking every time the plate. So you will never have the same output. There is something about manual part of the prints that makes the print unique in a kind of way.
well, totally. I mean, and which also makes it very undigital. And tell me, like, I would find that very exciting as an artist because again, like I think you've come up with a pretty cool solution for okay, how am I going to make this physical? Are you excited about it?
Yeah, yeah, I'm really happy, and I love to mix media as you were speaking before. So I every time I try to mix up printmaking, painting, and now I'm a little bit more focused on digital, but and I try also to print digitally a lot of stuff, but I found that the best way to display them are in our screens and or in big projection. Also, if you have top quality prints, but for me, it's a question, a personal question, but I prefer the flavor of digital works in digital screen or projection, not so much in digitally printed images.
Yeah, inkjet, I think I'm in agreement with you there if I understand what you're saying, and it's that inkjet kind of sucks,
No,
right?
you can have really a top quality in my opinion, but you don't have the light
Yeah, there's
on the
something
screen.
missing.
Yeah,
Yeah, like you can
basically is the light of the screen, the real
right.
lighting.
Right. I mean, you can combine it, I find, and just inkjet in general, it's a tough sell. Like I think for photography it works. But yeah, and to your point, it lacks that kind of saturation, that light that
Mm.
shines through a screen, right? And so you're stuck with it's almost like instead of white, it's like black if when everything's mixed together. And you
Yeah,
know,
you have to kind of rebalance the images when you have to print them in respect to the digital view. You will never have the same effect, in my opinion.
yeah, I agree. And just
Also embroidery is another good things to think at.
well, that's a very interesting question. Let's get to embroidery in a second here, but I was just going to say on, you know, they say how painting is dead, every 20 years or whatever. But I find when you're doing things like you're doing, let's say maybe some people would say, oh, etching, maybe etching is dead. It's all been done. But when you incorporate like digital into etching, I say, well, actually, there's new things being done because this wasn't even possible 50 years ago. And I think the same goes for painting. In a
Yeah.
sense, it's a way of making quote unquote painting in the general sense relevant still. Because if you're incorporating digital ideas and forms and whatever the case may be into your work, that wasn't really happening 50 years ago. So it's keeping it new, it's keeping it alive. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I love to do experiment things, and I love that the people also try the different ways and things. Surely the technology gives us different stuff. Another example, the images that they put in the etchings are made with AE, just because I wanted to make something coming from AE that it was 100% digitally native. And I don't think that also that my paintings on Procreate are totally digitally native, because that there's your hands that paints on a digital surface. In my mind,
Absolutely.
the material, the digital is made by pixel, by numbers. That
I,
is not a surface when you made a brush with a color in some kind of way. There's every time there's a software that convert your movement into this kind of data in a kind of way.
I totally agree. There's a natural contrast there between the organic movement of an individual, making their work and, scraping, and then like a digital form that, let's say, this hard edge digital form, whether it's a pixel or a circle. There's a natural contrast there. Just before we finish up, what were you saying? You didn't say tapestries. What was the thing you were talking about?
Embroidery.
Embroidery.
Digital embroidery from pixels, and try a good way to make the tapestry in a kind of way. Yes.
And so can you I've sort of thought about this. Like you see those wonderful, tapestries by Raphael, I think in London at the Design Museum there, and I think they're spread out a few places. There aren't many, but you see that and you go, "Oh, I'd love to do tapestry, let's say, or embroidery as you say." Have you found any, solutions where you can just kind of go to a website and order this thing?
I saw something here in there's a guy called Newin, and I saw something made in with digital embroidery. And
Hmm.
then I asked to my sister that have a little machine to make some experiment for me, but they are still brewing. I,
Right.
I
Like
wait to foresee some output.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be incredibly interesting. Runtun, do you have any thoughts or any questions for any of our guests here?
I like what you said about these new possibilities that form when you kind of take digital to physical and vice versa. I think that's very true. Like that whole painting is dead comment, and well, not really, because look at these new possibilities. I was thinking about that show that I saw by Matthew Stone in person the other week that I talked about on our last spaces. And he actually is using, there's this company in Red Hook in Brooklyn, not far from me, called Art Matter. I think it's MTR, something like that. But they have a machine that does like 3D printing, but you can do it with oil paint. And they've done a lot of projects. They've worked with Zancan before. They've prepared works for digital artists who are getting their work prepared for Sotheby's. They're a serious company. And after seeing this Matthew Stone painting that he did using their equipment, it is a convincing thing. And what's funny about it is it's just like you said, like there's this new possibility that happens when you take this digital work and you have to apply it in a physical way. It wasn't, looking at it, it was before I knew what it was and before I knew how the work was made, I was kind of having issues trying to like conceive in my mind how it was created, because unlike the prints on linen that were very flat and clearly printed to linen and made to look like oil paint, the texture was not there. But with this 3D printed version, there was texture, but there was something kind of happening where it almost looked like it was oil paint that had been airbrushed onto, and it was this new outcome that I'd never seen before. Here, I'll share it in the spaces for
I was
us.
going to say that sounds. I don't think I've ever seen
Uh,
anything like that before.
Here's the Matthew
And
Stone.
Matthew Stone
Um,
was the person from last week that you saw at the Hole in New York City. Is that right?
Correct. So he's the artist who fed Stable Diffusion a bunch of paintings and works of art that he had done, and used the AI to kind of create these new possibilities, and then took some of those possibilities and printed them to linen. And then there was one, just a singular one, where he used this 3D printer to then also implement texture into the work. So you can see like a short video here. The Art Matter company is there. They've also done other stuff, like I forget what it's called, but where they have like a pen or a brush that is then the computer like tells it the movements to make. What's cool is they've done nouns. So look at this. I'll share this one. The noun that they did, which you'd think, pixel art, screen printing makes sense. But when you bring in this new possibility of like oil paint texture, it's cool what it does to a pixel work like a noun. So I thought that was cool as well.
Totally.
And it's worthwhile clicking on those close-up photos to really see what's going on with that noun, because it's really cool the possibilities that exist.
That is so cool. It's almost, and we haven't even discussed, and I'm just dying to use a pen plotter, right? Like we haven't even discussed that because that's a whole other solution for doing pixel art.
That's the word I was looking for, pen
And
plotter.
here you
Yeah,
have like a paintbrush plotter, basically. I mean, that is incredible. It's. I wonder how they figure out how to. Maybe they put the paint down first, and then I guess I'll have to watch the video and then brush it. Because how do you get the paint on the brush? But I mean, this is. It's all happening so fast. We're into. It's all happening so fast.
yeah.
Well, does anybody have any other comments here as we wrap up here? There is no rush. Anybody on stage? Retro Manny, hop in and share your thoughts.
I just wanted to say, I guess echo what you were just saying. That paintbrush plotter is insane. The thing is, right, is when you do digital, I think I mentioned in the last show the software called Rebel, which is like a
I
painting app
remember.
that tries to mimic real paint, and it's really beautiful because it gets rid of the repetition that you can sometimes get with digital. Like if you're using Photoshop brushes or something, there's a lot of repetition that you've kind of either got to work against or just go with and not fight it. But the idea of this almost, you can have a digital piece of work, and I was just looking at each individual bit on the nouns post that you put at the top, and each different place that the paintbrush was plotted is different. There's no there's some repetition, but it doesn't really feel. It feels very organic at the same time. So there's a lot of possibilities there. It's just a way of getting that texture in that feels organic. I think a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, that noun is breaking my brain. actually, because it's going how it's yeah, like I mean, this is interesting. To echo what you're saying here, Manny, this is like wow. Thanks for sharing this, Rune Tune. This is
Of
this
course.
is super interesting. Does anybody else have any final comments before we wrap up here, or does anybody else want to join us on stage? I let these go a little longer if we like. Feel free to jump in, make a request. Dr. Version?
This is blowing my mind, this art.
Me too.
Because I've thought about painting what I've done digitally, because I've tried to replicate some of what I do with my paintings with GIFs. But Retro Manny was talking about doing, deliveries of media to Instagram, to theater. My day job is doing audio post production, so I'm very familiar with that. And also, I've done music and mixed records. I think some of the distribution you could think of with art, and you want it to look the best wherever it is. So you can keep in mind the screen, because when you work on music and you mix it and master it, you want to be, how's it sound in the car? How's it sound on headphones? How's it sound on different, like in my studio, I have a bunch of different speakers. So this kind of distribution of art there's a parallel to be like, hey, you don't have that control, but you should think about it, and you want it to look the best wherever it is. That's
You
just an
know,
idea I was thinking of.
speaking in terms of distribution, like, I mean, imagine if you had one of these machines in every major city and you wanted to do an in-person art show, you no longer have to ship that work of art. You just have them printed there. I mean, it's a problem solver for sure.
Well, and then you throw Midjourney 5 on top of this thing, and then it's like, okay, we solved the issue of, then you have these beautiful textures. It's like the chaos, the randomness in the brush, in a nice brush, is part of the beauty, right? And that makes, say, a brushwork beautiful and an inkjet kind of boring. If we had the nouns inkjet, I don't know if I'm going to put that on my wall, but what we see over there, sure. What the heck? That looks like gorgeous,
100%.
right?
Plus, I mean, I think this is kind of that proof that a lot of us believe in with these digital tools and AI art, where there's so many skeptics out there. They just can't see the practicality of this, or I feel like with a lot of people who are kind of against digital art and AI art, it's this whole idea of like, oh, it's just more of the same. But when you see the noun printed like that, or when you see any of this stuff, it really, it's proof that there are so many possibilities on the horizon with this stuff, and the thing is so new. So I think it kind of gives credence to what we're doing over here.
A wonderful place maybe to end this on. I mean, exactly. You have to keep an open mind, right? Like, I mean, because if you're like against AI art, like, and then now I mean, the world is going to run away on you, and you're just going to be left there like, no, I'm going to keep painting with my brush, and I'm going to show the world, and I'm going to give rebirth. Anyways, I could go on and on. Nicola, do you have any final thoughts before we go?
No, wanted to say thank you, and I think the same things. I looks at a lot of things that are great. That is great also that someone is capable to use all the instrument to make things like pen plotters, for example. That is another funny things that they use pretty old printers because the inkjet have changed also the printers word, and I found a lot of great stuff with 3D and also with the CNC, not the constructive process, but the sculpture process of the pieces with 3D files. And
Right.
I think
Right. I mean, that's a whole
everything
other.
is great, and I
Yeah.
love to experiment, to look at the great things around. So I find this is the good part of this world compared to traditional art world. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, we're
That's
happy
it.
to have you, Nicola, and thank you for
Thank
joining us
you.
on stage.
Thank you
Same,
very much
Dr.
to you too for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing those digital etchings and etched digitals. Those were really cool. I'm going to have to bookmark that and kind of explore that later.
Thank
Yeah,
you
me
very
too.
much. Thank you.
amazing links were shared here today. I recommend everybody check out these links. Thank you, Dr. Version. Thank you, Retro Manny. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, everybody, for showing up here today. Once again, come on stage and share your links next time. We're here next week. And thank you most of all to Runetoon, the wonderful co-host out of New York City. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, take care, everyone.